Hello and welcome to our final video in the series, Conflict Within the Colonies. Today we are specifically looking at Bacon's Rebellion. So to give you a textbook recap of Bacon's Rebellion, again, you should have read about this. It was only about a page within your textbook, and so I want to expand some of the overall consequences of this rebellion as well as the context that we're looking at. So we're looking at Virginia in roughly 1670, and Virginia is made up of a social pyramid, okay? At the top of this pyramid, we have the planter elite. Next, we have the freed indentured servants or farmers who came over free. Below them, we are going to have indentured servants working for either freed indentured servants or the planter elite. And then at the bottom, we have imported slaves, which isn't quite at its height at the moment in Virginia, but is definitely a growing source of labor. I would even go so far as to say that outside of this Virginia social pyramid, that we can also include the neighboring Native Americans. While they're not obviously included within how the structure of Virginia colony is developing, they are very much involved in how the colony is developing, even though they're not part of the pyramid itself. So to break it down a little bit, the planter elite controls at this point in time nearly half of the settled territory of Virginia. And they particularly gain their power through the headright system and royal grants. At the head of this planter elite group is going to be Governor William Berkeley, and this is going to be kind of our sole focus in the catalyst for Bacon's Rebellion. Okay, so at this point in time, we're taking a look specifically at why freed indentured servants, or farmers are particularly upset with the planter elite and this social structure that's been created within Virginia. To begin with, freedmen find it increasingly difficult to buy available land. Part of the reason is because land simply isn't cleared off, as in we have neighboring Native Americans still occupying nearby lands. And this makes it extremely difficult for those who have been recently freed from their indentured contracts to go out and either purchase that land or get that land. And in some cases, because they can't find available land to create their own farms or their own plantations, many turn to just signing an extension of their current indentured contract, mainly for the fact that that would lead to continued survival within the colonies, and it would continue to give them a source of living. Now, finally, there's a lot of tension surrounding the fact that the governor's passive policies towards nearby native lands really leads to displeasure among the local farmers, okay? So here's our kind of pyramid. These are some of the key points that we want to keep in the back of our minds as we start to look at Bacon's Rebellion. All right, now we're going to walk through how this rebellion actually takes place. So Governor Berkeley practices patronage, which upsets many people at this point in time. And a combination of two things are going to add to this tension beyond what I just discussed in the previous slide. First, the House of Burgesses took the vote away from landless freedmen. So while it's extremely difficult to purchase or find available land to create a farm on, now the ability to vote is being removed from those who cannot find land. In the second, tobacco prices are beginning to fall around the 1670s. And up until this point, tobacco had been that primary cash crop that Virginia strongly relied on. So now we add this to the fact that landless freedmen, they wanted nearby native lands for their own. This was their solution to finding available land. But the governor and planter elite, they don't want this to happen. And there's two reasons, okay? Number one, they wanted landless men to be an available labor source for them. They didn't necessarily want freed indentured servants going out, getting their own plot of land, and then having rival plantations to their own. So by making the access to land more difficult and being unwilling to go onto native lands, It means that you are maintaining a labor supply, albeit a very angry one. Now, the second reason is that the planter elite are trading with natives for furs and other goods, and they didn't necessarily want to create conflict with nearby Native Americans. One, because they know the threat that they pose, but also because they had resources that they found of value. So now we bring in Nathaniel Bacon, and he's actually part of the governor's council at this point in time, but he strongly disagreed with these practices and claimed it prevented economic opportunity for the settlers, especially those who rightfully gained their freedom through indentured servitude. And so he argues that there's corruption and mismanagement within the colonies and mismanagement of native lands. So, as a result of some of these growing opinions that are coming up at that point in time, some frontiersmen disobey the governor's orders, asking them not to proceed in taking native lands, and they actually attack local Native Americans, killing them and trying to put pressure on the colonial government for further action. And Bacon really latches onto this and becomes the leader of this movement. Bacon and his followers continue to attack local native nations, and they're doing this specifically in retaliation to the governor's lack of action or lack of wanting to take action. So, as a result of the pressure, the bloodshed, as well as the election of a less corrupt House of Burgesses, Bacon and his followers set fire to Jamestown and they begin demanding land and change with this situation. Now, unfortunately for Bacon and his followers, the rebellion quickly dies off when Bacon himself dies of dysentery in 1676. But as a result, the planter elite were extremely fearful of potential future uprisings, and they actually begin to turn towards more slave labor than indentured labor with this fear of what indentured servants were doing, the opinions that they were holding, and the actions they were actually taking at this point in time to challenge local government. So, what I would like to do is I would like to break down a classic stressful multiple choice question that you might come into contact with on the AP exam. If we're taking a look at this, obviously we have a very large quote, and then we have the question. It asks, which of the following changes to the labor system in Virginia resulted from Bacon's rebellion? So let's go ahead and read the quote quick, and then we're going to work through some critical thinking, and we're going to choose the correct answer. And just as a forewarning, this is probably one of the longest run-on sentences you will come into contact with. All right, let's begin. So this is coming directly from Nathaniel Bacon, 1676. This is from his declaration that was posted to the governor, and he quotes, "For having, when the army of English was just upon the track of those Indians, who now in all places burn, spoil, murder, and when might with ease have destroyed them, who then were in open hostility, for then hating expressly countermanded and sent back our army by passing his word for the peaceable demeanor of the said Indians, who immediately prosecuted their evil intentions, committing horrid murders and robberies in all places, being protected by the said engagement and word passed of him, the said Sir William Berkeley, having ruined and laid desolate a great part of his Majesty's country, and have now drawn themselves into such obscure and remote places, and are by their success so emboldened and confirmed by their confederacy, so strengthened that the cries of blood are in all places, and the terror and consternation of the people so great, are now become not only difficult, but a very formidable enemy, who might at first with ease have been destroyed." Okay. First of all, you're taking a look at that quote and you just listened to me read it, and you might be thinking, whoa, what? Wait, what? Here is a classic example of a quote that you will definitely come into contact with, but that is going to consume potentially way too much time when trying to choose the correct answer. And so if we can break down this quote Fantastic. But I want to highlight some key strategies that, when faced with a quote like this, you can do in order to save time when choosing or selecting an answer. First of all, we know this is coming from Nathaniel Bacon, okay? And we know for our prior knowledge and what we read in the textbook that he instigates a massive rebellion of freedmen and indentured servants against the planter elite. We have that background knowledge already in our brains. And this question is asking us to consider the labor system, all right? And so if we go through some of our options, we can, with just current knowledge, probably break down what is the correct answer. Think of this quote as a genuine stimulus, okay? This isn't necessarily a quote that we're using to drive us to answer this question, but rather to put us into the context of what the question is asking us, okay? It's putting us in that point of time and in that frame of mind to remember what exactly were the key points of Bacon's rebellion that I need to know. Okay, so let's go ahead and let's break these down. So first we have Native Americans conquered by Bacon became the primary source of labor in Virginia until the early 1700s. We can get rid of this as an option. Why? Well, because we know that Bacon and his followers were attacking local Native Americans, but they weren't specifically seeking out Native Americans as a labor source. Rather, they're seeking to attack local Native Americans because they want their land. And so this is not going to be a new labor system that emerges from this rebellion. So we're going to get rid of that as an option. Second, we have indentured servants who fought with Bacon, had their indentures extended to life, creating the first form of slavery in Virginia. Now, if we think back to the results of this rebellion, we know that the planter elite were quite fearful of indentured servants. And so with that frame of mind, we probably can eliminate this question because as a group that they're quite fearful of in terms of their ability to rise up, it seems unlikely that they would then extend their indentures to life, only instigating potentially more violence and more anger towards the planter elite and the local government. So we know that this is not going to be the new labor system in Virginia. Now, finally, wage labor replaced indentured labor in Virginia. Well, the number one reason why the planter elite and those who simply had already established successful plantations within Virginia, the reason why they don't want to extend the land isn't necessarily all to do with Native American relations. It partly has to do with the fact that they don't want rival plantations. They don't want that type of competition. And so it wouldn't necessarily make sense to pay labor or pay for labor when the goal of the planter elite is to continue making money. And so the solution to this problem is not introducing wages for indentured labor in Virginia. So that leaves us with our final option. It says slave labor began to replace indentured labor because slaves were seen as easier to control than indentured servants. And this is going to be the correct answer for this stimulus-based question. We know as a result of Bacon's rebellion that there's a lot of tension surrounding the relationship between indentured servants, freed indentured servants, and the planter elite. And moving forward, the planter elite is going to strive to make connections with the poorer citizens or the poorer colonists within the Virginia colony in order to avoid future uprisings. But a particular group that was easily oppressed at this point in time is going to be African slaves. And so unfortunately, Bacon's rebellion drives Virginia into focusing more on slave labor rather than indentured servitude for future labor work on their plantations. All right, thanks for watching the final video for Conflict Within the Colonies, Bacon's Rebellion.